Well, hi there. It's Laura from Firebird Summit. I wanted to do something today that I don't normally do, which is kind of build on the email I sent out on Monday. I got a lot of responses to it, and it's become a really big recurring theme with a number of my clients recently. And that's, how do you survive a new boss? I think it's a really probably one of the most common things for people to struggle through, regardless of your job, regardless of what level in an organizational hierarchy you're in, and to be fair, even how old you are and how long you've been doing it. Most of us are in jobs for one reason or another. And if our job is working for us, it's often because our relationship with our boss is working. Not always, but frequently. And so there's really almost nothing that we can do to our daily lives that's more disruptive than finding ourselves with a new boss. Whether that's because our old boss has left or been promoted or something has happened and we've been reorged, a new boss is always one of the most challenging things for people to adapt to. In this week's email, I talked about this as the most, sort of common way that I see people needing to re-engage their boss to understand what's expected of them. But I kind of want to talk about the other side of that. And that is, how do you start a conversation with your boss about what you need from them, not just vice versa? And I think it's really important to remember that you do have a reasonable, right to ask your boss what it is that you need. Now, obviously, your boss is going to have expectations of you, and frequently they are going to be different than what your previous boss had. Sometimes that is a sign of just maturing organization or a more experienced boss. Sometimes it's because they don't have any background and they're trying to get up to speed. And it almost doesn't matter what it is, because at the end of the day, this is about establishing a relationship, and the fundamentals of that relationship development process are ultimately still some degree of negotiation. So what I really, really wanted to talk to today about is that, you do have a right to talk to your boss about what it is that you need from him or her that's going to make you most effective. And especially when you're talking about, a situation where your boss might, still be learning your role, or maybe inherited your team and doesn't know exactly what you guys do yet. It's a really important place to start having the conversation so that you can start helping educate them at the same time that you're asking them what it is you need from them. So what I would say is there's always a couple of really good things to do. First and foremost is try to make sure you're having both formal and informal conversations with your boss as much as possible. Now, obviously, it's a little bit easier if you're in the same building or you're physically close enough that you have that kind of access. But wherever they happen to be located, wherever you're located, the more you can start trying to build a general rapport that goes beyond just your direct reporting structure, the easier a time it's going to be for you to have this conversation. That's kind of relationship 101. But the reality is, a lot of times people don't do that when it comes to a new boss, especially if they're feeling any degree of resistance. The next thing is, try to remain as genuinely curious as possible. Curious about what they know, curious about what their vision is, curious about what they're trying to learn, curious about what their strengths are. The more you can genuinely and consistently be open to their take on things, their view of their own strengths, their view of the potential for your team, whatever it is, the more genuinely open you can be, the easier it is for you to start finding some common ground and establishing some rapport. Plus, also keep in mind that the more you make the effort to be genuinely open to them, the more you lay the groundwork for them to be open to you. And I think the final thing is, make sure, this is especially true for managers who have direct reports under you, make sure that you are getting as much input as you can from your team about what it is they would like to see from your new boss, so that you're not just speaking exclusively on behalf of yourself, but you're also being the voice of your team. As a manager, that is one of your most important responsibilities. And it's something that a lot of times when you get caught in some of the anxiety around having a new boss, people sometimes forget, or they move to the back burner. And the truth is, while you don't want to establish, an it's us versus you kind of dialogue, you do definitely want to make sure that when you are speaking to your boss, you are demonstrating that you do look at what you are requesting of him or her from the perspective of both yourself and as a representative who's responsible for a team. And so I would say more than anything else, keep in mind that, you know what, a lot of times for your new boss, taking on a new team is also a difficult challenge. And not everybody handles challenges super gracefully. So try to be patient with both yourself and with your new boss, and try to remain curious, both about what your new boss is doing, expecting, asking of you, but also really about your own reactions. You know, I was recently speaking to somebody who, in the course of our conversation, recognized that, you know, she was kind of the only person on her team who was struggling to get behind the idea of having a new boss. And that the resistance was a little bit more her, and it was a little bit more her, you know, her preference not to start over again with a new boss after she had recently just kind of gone through this exercise with her previous boss. And while I understand that, the truth is we don't usually get that much control over this kind of thing. So don't just look at the situation and express curiosity about your boss, but always try to ask yourself, why am I reacting this way? What is it that's triggering me so badly? And is it really necessary? Or can I look at this a different way and try to make this as productive a relationship as possible? You know what, when it comes down to it, the relationship we have with our immediate boss is one of the most important influences in whether or not we're going to be happy at work or miserable at work. And so you kind of have to ask yourself and really decide whether or not you are prepared to make a genuine investment in making the relationship the best it can be, or if maybe, you know what, you were really attached to your old boss or the way things used to be, and maybe now it's just time to move on. Either one is totally fair. Where you run into trouble is when your attitude is really aligned around leaving, but you haven't pulled the trigger yet and you're actually staying. So try to remember, either one is a perfectly reasonable option, and nobody's really going to fault you in either case. However, you need to make sure that you're aligning yourself and the way you're behaving with whichever decision you choose to make. So have a fantastic week. I will talk to you next week from Miami, Florida. Bye.